Avery, I want to start with you today because I thought that was quite interesting because you sent me actually, the two of you sent me statement today and you had me do some homework because I had completely missed what that talk was about. And Avery, tell us, are you throwing under the bus or uplifting today?
So, I'm throwing under the bus the idea that Evan Bouchard should be traded. That to me is absurd. This is a defenseman who is third in the team in scoring. Not just third in D-man scoring the Oilers, third on the team in scoring, period. Only McDavid and Draisaitl have more points than Evan Bouchard. And in an NHL where teams are dying to have a right shot D-man, you want to trade this guy? The idea he should be dealt over miscues. I mean, yes, Evan Bouchard has had more of a down year defensively, but offensively, he's made up for it in strides. He's a 25-year-old D-man who will figure it out more and more, who will get better. He is someone who Mattias Ekholm has praised his game. Ekholm has said himself to me in the room. Ekholm told me that Bouchard has made him better as a defenseman. And people want to trade that guy? If you trade Evan Bouchard, you are losing that deal every single time. Because guess what? More than likely, you won't get a player like him back in the deal. You won't get him back in the deal. So trading Bouchard is dumb, dumb, dumb.
Let me ask you this, Avery. If we are talking strictly, actually, let me rephrase that. Are the only reason this is brought up is monetary? Because we all know the albatross in the room is Darnell Nurse's contract, who makes upward of $9 million a year. I have absolutely nothing against Darnell Nurse. He's a good second pair defenseman, but he is making Kel McCarr money. That is the problem. So is, in a way, Evan Bouchard a bit of a victim of the Darnell Nurse situation here? And is it the only reason we're talking about this? Because, I mean, he's that type of offensive defenseman who you are willing to deal with maybe some defensive problem with him because what he brings on the other side of the ice is so beautiful and is so great for the team. But if there was no salary cap, would that even be a discussion?
Yeah, no, of course it was an uncapped league like it was 25 years ago. Of course it would not be an issue. But yeah, and that really goes back to the issues when it came to the era of Ken Holland, when Ken Holland gave Darnell Nurse that 9.25 deal. So yeah, it does have the impact now in terms of what Bouchard makes and what he most likely will make, as Bouchard is an RFA end of the year. So yeah, it does have an impact. But it's funny, you mentioned the defensive side, Max. Actually, last year, if you look at the defensive metric last year, when it came to Oiler pairings, the pairing that allowed the least amount of high danger goals last season, who was it? Bouchard and Ekholm.
Yeah, having a Mattias Ekholm, and that's the thing, they have him. So I'm not the biggest Evan Bouchard fan, but I don't think you let that type of man walk. And you've said it. He's an RFA at the end of the season. He is not a UFA. So that will be interesting to see because him being RFA, you're not quite in the Mikko Rantanen situation that the Colorado Avalanche were. Mikko Rantanen becoming a UFA at the end of the season, if you were going to lose him for absolutely nothing, that was going to be a problem. But let's even take the worst case scenario, Avery. If a team came with an offer sheet for Evan Bouchard, it would be a huge offer sheet. Because let's remind people, a player has no obligation to accept an offer sheet. So if a team comes with an offer sheet that Evan Bouchard accepts, we know it will be an offer sheet, probably upward of $9 million. And then the Oilers, if they choose not to match, would get a plethora of first-round picks and second-round pick. So it's not quite that bad of a situation just yet for the Oilers. But I do agree with you, Avery. I'm not going to debate here. To me, you have that type of player, you need to find a way to keep him, especially it's not the same situation again as Colorado where it's a forward and you would already have Draisaitl and McDavid. You don't. You have an Evan Bouchard. You keep it. Mike, what do you do of this? Do you think that the Oilers absolutely need to keep Evan Bouchard?
I'm just going to be very uncontroversial and say yeah. I'm not sure what else to say. Man. As someone who knows what it's like to have a team with not much talent on the right-hand side, I think you should keep Evan Bouchard, I think you should keep your top right-handed defenseman who is on a very, very good pair with Mattias Ekholm. like I feel like out of all the things on the Oilers, again, coming from a person who's not watching them probably as often as Avry is, but someone who's following the Oilers from an outside perspective, seeing their run in the Stanley Cup playoffs last year, Evan Bouchard is not even close to one of your problems. Like, yes, he does have his weaknesses, kind of as you mentioned. Defensively, he probably isn't as good as he can be or should be. But if there's one thing about the Oilers that I feel like is one of their biggest strengths is their offense, right? You have McDavid, you have Draisaitl, and then you have an offensive defenseman like Bouchard who can keep up with him, not only points-wise, but like work on the same page. And it's led to success before, like not winning a cup, but winning the division, obviously, right? So as in like in the playoffs, like, reaching, the Stanley Cup finals. So again, yeah, I feel like the biggest problem, as we've all talked about financially, is Darnell Nurse. But I feel like if there's one thing that you should do with Bouchard is you work around him. Whatever he wants, you give him. And even though it might be tough to work out contract-wise, you have to keep him on the team, considering that not only is he good, as in like he puts up points and he's a steady offensive defenseman for the team, but also it's proven to work. It's just not one of those situations where if the Oilers hadn't reached the finals last year, this would probably have more heated discussion, because then you could probably argue a little bit of like, oh, Bouchard, has he proven himself in the playoffs yet? But he has. So this isn't a situation of, is he a question mark that we have to debate about? Like, no, he's a young offensive defenseman who still has time to grow, and he's proven himself. I feel like you have to work around him. And if anything, you just have a lot of other contracts on the Oilers you might want to talk about first. Like some of their offseason signings, like Skinner's kind of looked okay at best. It looks like this is from a guy who's reading stats and not watching the games. But some of these offseason signings that everyone really hyped up is in like, okay, the Oilers look so much better than they did last year. They're not, popping off the page like we thought they would. But Bouchard is like not even in your top 5 of people you should even think about trading away from the team.
Let me not be devil's advocate here, because as I said, I agree with Avry, but let me ask you a question, Avry, on this. How much can Connor McDavid, how do I phrase this? How much can Connor McDavid help the Oilers here? Because we all know Leon Draisaitl's money is almost doubling next year, going from one of the greatest contract in the league, barely over $8 million, to $14 million a year. So you have that coming on the books. And then the year after, Connor McDavid is up for a new contract. To me, when Leon Draisaitl signed with the Oilers, that was the sign that McDavid too would stay in Edmonton. I do not see how Leon Draisaitl, I could be completely wrong here, but I do not, those guys are two amigos. They really, I think they want to win together. I think Connor McDavid knows what the narrative would be around him if he left Edmonton without winning a Stanley Cup. So I do think he stays. And contrary to Leon Draisaitl, who, like I said, had been probably the biggest discount in the league since McKinnon wasn't a discount anymore, Connor McDavid has made his money. Well, you could argue all of those men have made their money, but from a purely NHL standpoint, Connor McDavid has made his money. Connor McDavid is the face of the league. He makes a ton of money. He's not making soccer player, football player, basketball player money in sponsorship, but he does great money. I'm pretty damn sure the Golden Arch, that I'm not going to name because they're not a sponsor of this show, gave good money to Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews for that kind of good commercial, I must say. Anyways, all this to say, I mean, Connor McDavid is not going to sign for $10 million. But what if he keeps a similar contract? What if he goes the Crosby route and says, hey, put me up for the same amount of money, which, with the cap going up, would become an amazing deal for the Edmonton Oilers. And I do think that would help him keep some teammates, get a better and more competitive team. You are there in Edmonton. Do you think it is something that Connor McDavid could do? And do you think it could solve some, not all, but some of the cap issues for the Oilers if he goes the Crosby route and doesn't, get a higher salary for his next contract?
Now, Connor's a guy who, yes, he does want to win a cup, and I know that it burned. Losing in Game 7, that burned him. I mean, we saw on Face-Off how he didn't care about winning contract. He didn't care about that. He didn't give a crap about that trophy. He wanted the Stanley Cup. So, yes, he's a guy who does want to put winning above virtually everything else. But I'm not sure if he does want to sacrifice his bank account to do it. I'm not sure if he's going to say, hey, I'll take less. So I do still think him and his agency do say we want this guy to get paid. So it may not be a level of he's a more than Leon, but I do think he will take a lot of money when his cap goes up. I do think he'll still be in that range of maybe $11-12 million, but we got to see, because at the end of the day, Connor wants to win a cup, so we got to see what he want to decide to do in a year or two here. So we'll see.
Interesting to see. Connor McDavid makes $12.5 million a year right now. He will be a free agent at the end of the next season. Can he be the first $15 million a year man? Can he be the first 60? With the cap going up, we don't know. Maybe he'll be the first $20 million a year man. Who knows in the NHL?